Hi, friends. I hope you all are doing great. Today, I, Kunal Nagpal, am feeling extremely delighted to present the fantastic news in front of you. Yes, you have heard me right. As all of us are quite aware, that our Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi ji is actually moving towards his completion of 9 years term towards his overall contribution to the Indian economy. I would like to present a very, very remarkable achievement in front of you, dear guys. This forum, Economics Enthusiasts Academia, is really a strategic forum, and it really it's really worthwhile to present the news that India's unemployment rate is actually reducing at a very, very remarkable rate as per the recent statistical figures. And my dear friends, all of us are quite aware that the overall scenario existing in the overall global economy has been quite uncertain from quite a few months, and it's really significant. It's really significant that India, being a developing economy, has really glorified the overall stature of the developing economies, which is actually helping it to stand out, to get highlighted in the entire global economy. For instance, the various policies like the First India policy, its Atmanirbhar plan, which is actually the foundation of its overall development, its keenness to excel, its keenness to actually help the other nations, are some of the few highlighting factors, rather the very significant highlighting factors, which are really playing a very worthwhile role to help India really align its overall strategies, its overall vision in sync with the overall global economic developmental goals. Its green initiative is actually worth an applause. Now, coming back to today's discussion, that is, which is actually entitled to discuss the overall unemployment rate, which is actually lowering if we draw the comparative analysis with that of the COVID scenario, which was existing at the time of Delta wave when it was at its peak in India. At that time, the unemployment rate went at a considerable high level. But if we draw the comparative analysis of today's times with that particular point of time, that success rate is really remarkable. Moreover, as our Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi ji has been consistently stating that the overall development of the Indian economy, or in fact any economy for that matter, is actually directly proportional to the rate of women participation in that particular economy towards the contribution of overall economic activities. So, my dear friends, let's begin with today's discussion, which is going to describe the employment rate in the Indian economy and how it has been progressively improving, hence accelerating the overall pace of development of our economy. And in this particular discussion, we are basically focusing on the urban section. So, my dear friends, urban unemployment dips to 6.8%, and better than expected economic activity in the fourth quarter and strong services sector led growth contributed to urban unemployment declining to 6.8% in the quarter through March from 7.2% 3 months earlier. The unemployment rate for both males and females aged 15 years and above was also way below the year earlier quarter's reading of 8.2%, according to the periodic labor force survey released by the government on Monday. This is really significant. That is, both the genders, that is males and females, if we consider the latest statistical figures, and we draw the comparative analysis with the scenario which used to exist 3 months ago, that has shown considerable improvement. That is, this is really worth an applause considering the overall trend being observed in the overall global scenario. And keeping in mind, India is the developing economy. Despite of that, India's success is really worth an applause, my dear friends. Urban unemployment was nearly half from 12.6% witnessed during April to June 2021, when the Delta wave of COVID-19 was sweeping across the country. That's what I stated, the trend which used to exist in 2021. The rate had actually peaked at 20.8% in the first quarter of fiscal 2020, if I talk about the period which marked the commencement of COVID outbreak in India, owing to the lockdowns during COVID, which is actually very well explainable. That is, because of the lockdowns, the unemployment rate would automatically spike up, and that's what the scenario at that particular time was. That is 20.8% unemployment, which is quite significant if we compare it with today's unemployment rate, which is actually 6.8%. This shows our overall dedication and determination to achieve the equilibrium in the economy. Correct? This really shows our excellence, our performance, which is par excellence, which is really paving the ways, whose foundation is actually self-sustainability or Atmanirbharta, and which is actually helping us to move forward a step ahead towards India's first policy, that is to help other nations as well, to actually provide them help in the times of difficulty, when they are not able to sustain themselves or when they are going to particular crisis. So this particular discussion, which is entitled towards the discussion of the unemployment rate and how it is showing massive improvement in the Indian economy, is really a beautiful case study for any economist for that matter. And that's what my objective is, to present these facts with the overall background of our economy and why it is getting highlighted. These are very, very significant milestones. So, my dear friends, the data released by the government last week showed that the formal employment had actually jumped to the highest levels since 2017 and 18, as both Employees Provident Fund Organization and Employees State Insurance Corporation had witnessed a surge in the net addition of subscriptions. So what does this actually highlight? This is showing the pre-COVID scenario which used to exist in 2017-18, and our today's performance is actually creating laurels with the pre-COVID scenario as well. This is really worth an applause. And as per the Purchasing Managers Index, the job creation was marginal during this particular period. So, my dear friends, this is actually very, very significant for our economy. Moreover, the decline in the male unemployment was much higher than the female unemployment. Yes, it will actually take time, since the participation of males in the economy is actually quite high as of now, if we draw the comparison with the rate of women participation in the Indian economy, though the women participation is gradually showing massive improvement with time, but obviously it will take time for women to come at a level par with that of men. But in their own levels, both males and females are showing massive improvement with their previous contribution or with the level of performance which used to exist earlier in their respective domains or in their respective categories towards the contribution of the overall economic growth to our economy. So, going further, while the female labor force participation improved to 22.7% in the fiscal fourth quarter from 22.3% in the previous quarter, the unemployment rate remained above 9%. That's what this particular fact is actually illustrating, the concept which I have just put. So while the male unemployment declined to 6.0% in the fourth quarter of this particular fiscal year from 6.5% in the previous quarter, the female unemployment actually came down to 9.2% from 9.6% in October to December period. And going further, my dear friends, there was actually further deterioration in the nature of work for women. The proportion of women in the self-employed category increased to 38.5%. And that's what this particular case study actually signifies or portrays, that though the participation of women is actually increasing and improving with each passing day, considering the overall scenario existing in the Indian economy, and secondly, considering the overall patriarchal setup. But if we consider the present scenario, and if we consider the statistics of the male contribution towards the economy and the female contribution towards the economy, if we draw the comparison between these two particular parameters, obviously, as of now, the male contribution is at a higher level as compared to the females. It will take time to attain a balance, that is, to attain gender equality in all the levels. And as I had discussed in my preceding case study of women entrepreneurship or women participation, obviously women are actually more comfortable in doing the businesses, in doing the self-owned businesses, that is the proprietary firms, in comparison to their contribution towards the private jobs or government jobs. Obviously, because as we know that India is a developing economy, and though the progress is actually quite significant, but things will actually take time to get streamlined in a proper manner 100%. In terms of providing women security, in terms of the overall modification of the time levels, of the time scales, of the provision of transport facilities for the women, considering the overall work-life balance they need to manage, and especially when we are considering the Indian economy, there are various other factors for the women which really come into play. That is, there is a gradual shift being observed in the overall transmission of the trend, but there are various factors which come into play. to change the overall socio psychological setup, and to go through the overall cultural barriers. That will take time. But obviously, as we have just seen in our case study, the trend is really overwhelming. The progress is really overwhelming. That is, we are going forward at a very, very positive rate. So this is really worth an applause, my dear friends. Any questions you have, you can freely post your queries in the comment section. Thank you so much. Namaskar.